Ms. Carrie Tan.
Thank you, Ministers, for addressing this very important topic. And I'd just like to understand with regards to the extension of the financial support for short and medium-term assistance that Min Wong talked about earlier. Since the government's already prepared to provide this extension of support, and I think we can safely be assured that the lowest income amongst us will be hit by the inflationary pressures. And we all understand that beyond the actual pain of having to pay more is the anxiety and the frustration and uncertainty that could hurt us more, presenting vulnerabilities for people to exploit in our society. So what are the downsides of just making this 3 months extension to our lowest income automatic? Will the minister consider making these extensions automatic so that both the recipients and also our civil servants and SSOs can do away with the administration burden of having to reapply, renew, find justifications, etc., which could go a long way to, I think, reduce the stresses that people are facing in this very difficult time. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we understand the concerns that the lower-income groups face, and as I mentioned just now, we are focused on providing more help to them, particularly during this period when they face the pressures of higher prices. So we are already going to extend ComCare for a minimum duration of 6 months for all new ComCare SMTA applicants and extend ComCare SMTA by another 3 months for those who require further assistance. Question is, why not make that automatic? Well, the circumstances do differ from case to case. So at this stage, rather than make it automatic, for those who need it, they will get it. And that's the assurance. And we will streamline the process. We will make it easy for them to apply. There is no need to resubmit so many different documents all over again. It shouldn't be a burden to them, nor should it create stress. For those who need it, the assurance is that the support will be given to them.
Mr. Louis Chua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got two subsequent follow-up questions. One for Finance Minister Wong. It's in relation to the PQ which I had in terms of the fuel excise duties. The 900 plus million that was mentioned, does that relate to all petroleum products, or is it only to that for the petrol and diesel which is sold to end consumers at the pump, since we do have quite a substantial petrochemical industry as a whole? The second question is really again in relation to fuel prices, but probably more for Minister Dr. Tan. If you look at Brent crude prices, the last time it was above $100 a barrel, it was sometime in 2012, 2014. Back then, your 95 petrol was going at about 220, 240. But today, when Brent is above $100 over again, people see that the pump prices are now about $3. So whether Minister can share in terms of the structural factors that actually contributed to this higher pump prices, just so that everyone can have a better sense of what are the contributing factors to this 20 to 40% higher pump prices relative to the Brent crude prices. Thank you.
So the $920 million I cited refers to fuel duties collected at the pump for petrol and diesel.
Mr. Murali Pillai. Minister Tan See Leng.
As I've shared earlier on, we have been monitoring in terms of the fluctuation for the prices against Brent. We find that it hasn't gone up excessively. I don't think that it is a apple-for-apple comparison between what has happened in, I think, 2014, is it, the target period, and what it is today. Because obviously, other fixed costs would have gone up, rental perhaps, also manpower costs, plus, it could be even different type of production, procurement costs that is not just tied to the brand part itself. But I think that it would be a lot more precise to compare what was the prevailing quarter and the movements, and to see whether that increase is actually attributable to whether it's signaling or collusion. I think that would give us a much better indication. Thank you.
Mr. Murali Pillai.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for allowing me to speak. Sir, I have two supplementary questions to the Honourable Finance Minister. First, in relation to his, sorry, may I rephrase? May I ask the Honourable Finance Minister why he feels it's not appropriate to calibrate downwards the petrol tax at this point in time, given the backdrop of the following facts. First, when the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister announced the hike in petrol tax in February 2021, he pegged the reasons for increasing it as really to promote a green environment, not revenue. Number two, at the time when he announced the fee hike, or rather the tax hike, the Ukraine invasion would not have been foreseeable. But at that point in time, he and his minister and the government officers would have calibrated a certain standard or certain behavior pattern, in terms of increase in the fuel price and how much behavior would have changed from that point onwards. In fact, since the announcement was made, the price was hiked by about 10%. Number three, we all accept that the war drove up the price. In fact, since 24th February 2022, when the invasion happened, to date, the price at the pumps were increased about 5%. So why could we not calibrate downwards the fuel tax so that we have an optimal behavior that was planned as at February 2021? That's my first question. The second question is that if the minister still does not intend to intervene, then when does he think is a proper time to intervene, having regard to the fact that a number of vehicles are used by fellow Singaporeans for their trades and businesses? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I think I had tried to explain very comprehensively why it's not a good idea to reduce fuel duties. Let me try again in light of Mr. Murali's three questions. We collect fuel duties for both revenue as well as externality reasons. And the revenues generated are not small, and they are used for a range of very important things to subsidize many activities, public transport, whole range of things, amongst others. So we should think carefully about giving up these sources of revenue, particularly when we are facing considerable revenue challenges already. And we had a long discussion in the budget debate about all the revenue and fiscal challenges we face. That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned just now, there are the considerations of who benefits from this. And as I highlighted, 4 in 10 households, only 4 in 10 in Singapore, Singaporean households own cars. In fact, 4 in 10 is for the average, for the bottom 20%, 1 in 10. For the top 20%, it's 6 in 10. So in the end, the ones who benefit more are the better off when you do something like that. And so that's something we want. So is that the best use of subsidies? And then thirdly, we will be moving in the wrong direction because fuel duties price in the negative externalities, as we all understand, to society and to environment. In a way, you can think of them akin in part to a carbon tax on vehicles. Because we do not apply carbon tax on fuel, fuel duties are akin in part to carbon tax on vehicles. So we are already moving in the right direction on carbon tax, to raise carbon tax, to accelerate our green transition and to achieve our net zero target. So it will not be consistent as we move on that front to, on the other hand, reduce fuel duties. That's why, on balance, we think the better approach is not to intervene in this way. We are saying we will help people who are affected. We will continue to help them. We have been helping, and we will continue to monitor the situation. And for those who need more help, and if the situation worsens, we will certainly do more. But the better way of helping is not through a reduction in fuel duties. The better way of helping is to directly help those who are impacted through other means, and we have these different means to help those who are impacted, be it households or businesses.
Mr. Gerald Giam.
So since the budget statement, the SP Group has announced that the electricity tariff for April to June will rise by almost 10%. With this new development, could the government consider a special additional tranche of U-Save rebates to help Singaporeans cope with this upcoming electricity hike? Secondly, I understand from the MOF budget website that the January 2023 U-Save rebate is part of the assurance package to soften the impact of the upcoming GST hike, while the first three tranches of U-Save in 2022 are part of the household support package, HSP. However, now in this handout, the January 2023 U-Save rebate is listed as part of the support for households. So can I clarify that the January 2023 U-Save rebate is now part of the HSP and not the AP? And if so, shouldn't there be an additional U-Save rebate for the AP? And lastly, I just want to clarify, the second minister, I think, did not answer my question about whether the Committee Against Profiteering will address concerns that businesses could use reasons other than the rise in GST as a pretext to make unjustified price increases on essential products and services. Could the minister please clarify on that?
Mr. Speaker, when we sized the assurance package, we already knew that prices were rising. We had anticipated that. We said it in the speech. If you listen to the budget speech, we highlighted the concerns that Singaporeans had about higher prices then. Prices had already increased because of the tensions in Ukraine. We knew this was coming. So we did two things. We put in place a household support package, $560 million, that will be disbursed this year. And we enhanced the assurance package, and in fact we have sized the assurance package very generously. More than just a GST offset, it also addresses cost of living. That's why the assurance package will delay the impact of GST by at least 5 years for the majority of Singaporeans, and for the low income, 10 years. Now, for GST offset purposes, 5 years is very generous. We could have said 2-3 years of offsets, more than enough. But we sized it deliberately, generously, in order to cushion the impact on Singaporeans, especially the lower income. And that's why when you combine the household support package and the assurance package together, there is considerable support that will be going out very soon. And that's what we've tried to do in the brochure, to pull it together to show Singaporeans in one simple to understand way all the help that will be coming up in the year ahead. And to illustrate, for a 4-room household, we're talking about $150 a month of utility rebate this month. Every quarter, there will be another $150, so $600 altogether. That is enough to cover about 4 months' worth of their utility bills, even accounting for higher electricity prices. So that's what we have done. Now, you say, well, what happens subsequently? Next half of the year, what if oil prices go up to much higher, electricity prices go up much higher? Well, we will, as I said, continue to monitor the situation, assess the impact of what we have already announced and will implement, look at the global situation, and as I said just now, if the situation worsens, the government will do more. But for now, let us roll out and properly implement all that's in the budget already, which is already giving considerable support to households.
Mr. Speaker, can I answer Mr. Gerald Giam's
Yes,
point?
please.
Now, I think, Mr. Giam, the government's role, Mr. Speaker, the government's role is to ensure that free market competition can function as it should. Now, we guard against profiteering through a multi-pronged approach that goes beyond CAP, because this includes promoting competition, it helps consumers make informed decisions and encouraging a very diversified supply chain. So earlier on in my speech, I've also alluded to the fact that we've got apps like Price Kaki, Fuel Kaki, to allow, and this is developed by Case, to allow consumers to easily compare the prices of groceries or hawker food items from different sellers. Now, on top of that, CAP will also work with various agencies and organizations, including CCCS, the Competition Consumer Commission of Singapore, CASE, the Consumer Association of Singapore, and PA, People's Association, to assess the feedback provided on potential GST profiteering. And CAP will also engage with the relevant businesses where necessary to find out reasons for this price increase. Now, CAP may also make public errand businesses that seek to profiteer on the pretext of GST increase account for it. So, today, we have convened the CAP ahead of the proposed GST increase to make sure that we're able to preempt some of these things. Now, I think it's also important, and CAP will indeed take a data-driven approach to prioritize its investigations. So, just to put it in perspective, perhaps for the members' clarity, CCS monitors market concentration data and shares this data with CAP. Then, CAP will review all feedback provided on unjustified price increases that use this GST increase as a cover and investigate. So I hope that that provides the clarity that's needed to the members' question. Thank you.
Mrs. Xie Yao-Chuan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the Finance Minister's considerations for not cutting duties on petrol, and chief amongst these considerations being that it subsidizes private transport, which the less well-off may consume less of. So I appreciate the considerations, but diesel undergirds so much of our supply chain and indeed the delivery of essential goods and services. And that is the reason why I filed a question specifically on the possibility of cutting duty on diesel products. And I just hope to seek a clarification from the Finance Minister as to the possibility of this. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the risk of sounding like a broken record, whether it is diesel or petrol, fuel duties, aside from the issue of who benefits, also has an important externality consideration. And that's, for that matter, our diesel duties are already not that high compared to fuel duties, first point. Second point, from an externality point of view, we do need to have that the duty in place in order to, as we all talked about, wanting to move greener, wanting to embrace more energy-efficient modes of transport, a point which everyone supported, incidentally, in this House not too long ago. And then now, at the first sign of price rising, we are wanting to withdraw so quickly. So I think let's have some perspective on seeing the broader considerations and challenges. Yes, we have indeed an immediate issue of inflation to tackle, but we also want to press ahead with our net zero plans and our green transition. And these duties are there for a purpose, for that purpose, important purpose. It doesn't mean we will not do anything to help the affected groups at all. That doesn't, because we will find other ways to help. And we will continue to monitor the well-being, not just of households, but of the different groups that members have highlighted: taxi drivers, private hire car drivers, delivery drivers. We'll continue to monitor closely their incomes, their well-being, and if need be, as I highlighted just now, we will do more to help them, but we will help them directly, more effectively, rather than through a reduction in duties.
Mr. Abdul Samad.
Sir, I have a question to ask from the Minister MTI regarding the price hike. can I know who actually decides the price hike of electricity prices? Is it the government or EMA or actually SP Group? I'm setting this as a concern because I'm also an employee for SP Group. Whenever there's a price hike that is being mentioned, my fellow members and workers at the workplace and facing publics will always be asked, how come your price hike? So I hope if that challenge can be alleviated to EMA announcing the price hike compared to SP Group, that will actually help to eliminate the stress that is faced by my fellow members and workers.
I think there's a confluence of the sector agencies that determine the price hike. We are exposed to global energy prices, and when oil price rise, electricity prices will of course rise in tandem. But I think collectively, EMA looks at the wheeling charges, looks at multiple components, including the grid charges and so on, before deciding. And also looks at various different components, fuel price directly attributable to fuel costs, the procurement of fuel costs, and the non-fuel costs. And then collectively come up with a calibrated price increase. So it's not, it is working in conjunction, but ultimately, EMA determines the price rise. I hope that answers your question.
Sir Leong Mun Wai.
Speaker, PSP is of the view that inflation is here to stay. It will be a multi-year uptrend. The earlier and the more contingency plans we have, the better. So far, all our discussion in this chamber has concentrated on cost. I have two questions to ask the Minister of Manpower about income and wages. I would like to ask the Manpower Minister, one, are there plans in place to ensure that the Singaporean incomes and wages will rise with inflation going forward? Because we expect inflation to be a multi-year phenomenon. Two, because Singaporeans are in constant competition with foreigners, how to ensure that Singaporean workers will continue to be competitive vis-à-vis foreign power in a rising wage environment? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I think this is an MTI statement, but I think the member wishes to clarify that perhaps I may have the opportunity to just elaborate a bit on this. Thank you. Now, we have been very focused on uplifting the lower wage workers. In fact, I think the whole crux of this year's COS and pretty much the last 2 quarters of last year, SMS Zaki has gone out to talk about the progressive wage model, how we have set up schemes. We have also illustrated the fact that the bottom 20% in terms of the wage growth over the years have actually exceeded the median wage rise for the rest of the salaries. In our constant and consistent efforts to ensure that we continue to uplift our low-wage workers. On top of that, to support businesses to alleviate the cost of this progressive wage model, the government has also put aside a significant sum of money to transition, to help companies transition by the progressive wage credit scheme. That is one big portion of what uplifting is all about. If the member had sat through the MOM COS, our 3 focus this year was on uplifting, upgrading, and upholding. Now, so while we uplift them, we also have to upgrade them. So the significant programs in terms of upskilling them, reskilling, helping them to pivot, we have together on a multi-sectoral, multi-ministerial level, we have gotten the industry transformation maps, and to match the industry transformation maps with the JTMs, the job transformation map, which provides a very good guide and compass as to where companies are in terms of the development forward. And we help them. We have all these productivity solutions grant. We have multiple different schemes to help companies to pivot while we train and we upgrade our Singaporean core. So that's the upgrading part. Upholding fairness. We ensure that now with the tripartite committee on workplace fairness, we're now looking on how we're going to move this into legislation. On top of that, for the foreign workforce complementarity, we've also rolled out Compass, which is a complementarity assessment framework to allow us to bring in foreign talent in a very nuanced way so that they are able to contribute to our strategic economic priorities. They can address the training of our locals in uplifting and making sure that we are world-class in terms of our workforce. So those are a whole multitude of measures that we put in place. And obviously, we are also working in terms of making sure that we strengthen the retirement savings in our CPF account. We continue to press ahead to nudge our people to upgrade themselves, and through all of our SG United program, as I've shared earlier on, for the mid-career, for the slightly older workers, we will make the SG United program a permanent fixture of our policy itself. I mean, the entire list of measures that we've done to help our local Singaporeans continue to move ahead, to make sure that their real wages exceed inflationary rates. I think those are the measures that we have. I'm not sure what other suggestions or other better solutions that the PSP has today. Thank you.
Mr. Leong.
Thank you, Speaker. Just to confirm what the Minister has said, so the progressive wage credit has taken into consideration the future rise in inflation to ensure that Singaporeans' incomes and wages rise with inflation. So this to confirm that is correct. Secondly, with regards to the Compass scheme, I hope tomorrow I will have another opportunity to debate the Minister on the scheme. Thank you.
Would the Minister like to respond?
Mr. Speaker, sir, may I remind the member that we're talking about the cost of living, inflation, energy, fuel prices, and goods. If he would like to file a separate PQ on the manpower issues, I'm happy. I'm always waiting for him to do so. Thank you.
Dr. Lim Wee Kiak.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask one clarification from both ministers as regards to the statement you just made, saying that if inflation were to go up higher, government stand by ready to help, both the residents as well as the businesses. Currently now, inflation is already very high. So the big question is that how high, what is the threshold are you waiting for before more help can be delivered, and what are the help that the businesses as well as the citizens can expect?
Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to monitor a range of macroeconomic indicators. We look at our growth, economic growth, for example. We look at inflation. We look at the impact of inflation on different groups. We look at real incomes, for example. And on real incomes, I think it's important to highlight, it's not possible for the government to fix nominal wages to guarantee that real incomes will always be positive. It's not, we don't determine wages. But what we can do is continue to work hard on all the things we are doing to restructure, to transform the economy, to uplift productivity. Those efforts will pay off and will help us year by year, ensuring that incomes rise and hopefully continue to rise faster than inflation. That must be our economic strategy. You can't make this happen by fiat. You can't dictate wages, but you can continue to press ahead with restructuring and transformation, which is what we are doing across all our economic agencies. On the point of how high should inflation have to be before we see more help, I think is what Dr. Lim is asking. I am not able to give a specific trigger point at this, at now. We, as I said, monitor a range of indicators, not just the headline of economic growth, inflation, for that matter, unemployment, but also how it impacts on different groups and different income groups, different occupations. So, and then for that matter, what is the impact of our current package of measures which have not been implemented? We need to see that properly implemented and feed through the economy as well. So there are all these different considerations, and that's why we cannot so simply distill it to just one key parameter, but the assurance that we continue to give is we will monitor this very closely, and should there be a worsening of the situation externally and within Singapore, we will certainly stand ready to do more.
Mr. Saktiandi Supat.
Mr. Speaker, I'm following up on a question that my resident raised to me, and over the past Meet the People sessions online, there were a few residents who are local SMEs, small SMEs, who came to me highlighting about the rise in electricity prices. And I think it's in reference to my PQ as well on SMEs, smaller SMEs. So my question is in regards to whether MTI or MOF is amenable to a lower tier TR track, for example. As we know, some of the tracks, the track that we have now is applied to a larger SMEs, and whether in the future there could be a lower tier. My concern is, as local SMEs are very important because they employ quite a significant number of our workers. And we were talking about wages, we were talking about jobs, we were talking about unemployment. We need to address the local SMEs who employ a significant number of our local workers. And as such a move, if it's amenable from MTI or MOF in the future, in terms of a lower tier track in the future, whether that is a possibility. Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Yeah.
Please proceed.
I understand the members' angst, and I feel the same angst for all of the SMEs. I think that when you look at the tier itself, indeed, that's exactly what we've tried our level best to do. So for companies, for SMEs, or even larger enterprises who do not want to go on a fixed price contract for longer term, we offer them tracks. This is on a monthly basis because there are many SMEs that are still hoping that the current high prices is temporary, and they're hoping that with the spot prices, thinking that by the time they reach June, July, it may drop. Therefore, they want to hold off and wait for it to drop before they enter into a longer term contract. So the flexibility that we provide in providing monthly, and then separately, we went on to talk to, as I've shared just now, Sembawang and Keppel to provide longer contracts, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, up to 3 years. Provides a lot more predictability, and it provides some level of certainty, albeit not back to what it was before. Now, so I guess the part that we are in this difficult position is to, if we are saying that you want to have a separate tier, a lower tier, then the price differential has to be subsidized by someone, right? And if the member, perhaps I may be getting it wrong, the member can clarify, but if the member is suggesting that the government steps in to subsidize that component, then I think that it will be very difficult, because electricity power consumption is one of those things that how do you sort of subsidize that when people would then just keep consuming more, you see? So I think that is the difficult part. So to the extent that it's possible, what we have done is that we have continued to ensure stability, security, consistency of the supply. The pricing part, what we've tried to do is also to negotiate on their behalf to see how, depending on the needs of the different companies, some, because they feel they cannot take a long-term hedge, we then provide on a monthly basis, and that tracks. For those companies who feel that, look, I need to have this at least on a stable basis for 6 months, we've also provided the option for that, and then up to a year, up to 2 years, and up to 3 years. I think that today is a very nuanced approach that we have adopted. Thank you.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Thank you, Speaker. Could I clarify with Mr. Wong that there will actually be no specific measures that are targeted toward households as well as small businesses that are operating in the transportation sector? Now, of course, I understand Mr. Wong's arguments about how broad-based fuel excise taxes are regressive, and of course I understand the concept. I'd like to think I understand the concept of externalities, and I also wish that these budget measures, when they're brought forward, should be allowed to operate. Now that said, CPI was 4.3%, but it was 17.2% in the latest figures for the transportation sector. So households operating vehicles for commercial purposes, while they do benefit from budgetary measures as consumers, they are also facing higher prices as both consumers and producers. So even if we wish to limit the beneficiaries of transportation-specific relief, I wonder whether there will be some targeted measures either captured by the road taxes that are being paid by these families, or in terms of whether they use commercial vehicles for the purposes of business. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I believe Associate Professor Lim is referring to businesses that are small businesses that are running on commercial vehicles and therefore impacted by the higher pump prices. And that would include taxi drivers, BHC drivers, delivery drivers, and the like. As I mentioned just now, some companies are already making adjustments. They are already raising their fares to help their drivers. For example, some taxi companies are still continuing with rental concessions, for example, and there are other, companies that are also doing other things to help their delivery drivers. So these are in place today, which means that the costs are being shared with consumers because the fares go up, delivery rates go up, which means that the costs are shared in part, not just borne solely by these delivery riders, but shared with consumers. And as I mentioned, we have helped to cushion the impact on consumers also through different packages that we have in the budget. We also have a small business recovery grant that will be applied to all SMEs who are in the affected sectors, including small people who are running logistics, delivery. They would be eligible if they meet the criteria. So the schemes are there. Companies themselves have adjusted. There is some cost sharing now. As I said earlier, let's monitor the effects of all that we are doing, how it percolates through the economy before we decide on our next steps.
Ms. Janadang. Oh, sorry. Mr. Liang Eng Hua.
I thank the Finance Minister for the new measures that were just announced, and also in response to my PQ about the timings of the payout. So much of the cost increases are supply-driven. So the COVID-related situation, the supply chain stresses, the war in Ukraine, and the wages, which we want to have wage uplift. So my concern is that there's this series of cost increases and price increases will interfere into each other, and whether that will trigger off an inflationary spiral. So I'd like to ask the Finance Minister whether what can the government do to break this chain of interaction in the prices, in the cost, and then to counter this momentum of price increases. My second question is to Minister Tan See Leng. I appreciate the Committee Against Profiteering to check on unjustifiable profiteering. But we also know that this is not a magic bullet. You still need competition to counter all this profiteering, and there must be choices for consumers. So we'd like to ask Minister Tan whether would CAP focus more on those sectors that are, or businesses that have less choices for consumer, less competition, where the businesses have bigger market power. How can we focus on those, and in particular whether have CAP or CCCS identified any of these sectors?
Mr. Speaker, just before I reply to Mr. Liang's question, just a quick clarification on my response to Associate Professor James Lim just now. I said small business recovery grant extended to different sectors. Transport logistics are not eligible. It's for the sectors affected most by SMMs, which mostly are F&B and retail, but the broader point remains, which is that many of these companies in the transport and logistics sector have made arrangements, fares going up, different ways to help their drivers, cost sharing with consumers, who also benefit through different help measures from the government. So let us monitor what's happening in this space, the effects of our measures before we consider next steps. Just a small clarification on that point. On Mr. Liang's point, he is absolutely right that we have to watch carefully the dynamic which he talked about, a wage price spiral potentially taking place. For now, inflation expectations are well anchored. And as far as the labor market tightness is concerned, there are some ways in which we can help ease the current situation. For example, the opening up of borders will allow more migrant workers to come in, particularly in some of the hard-pressed sectors like construction, marine, and process. And this will help ease the situation. Secondly, we are continuing to do everything we can on our productivity efforts as announced in the budget. And the more we can push on this front to reduce reliance on labor, to go for automation, productivity initiatives, that will also help ease some of our manpower constraints. But the risk of a wage price spiral taking place is real, and that's why it also means we have to be very careful in designing any future government interventions. Because if we are not careful, government spends more, and this feeds into wages, and then it may cause prices and then wages, and it may cause inflation to be worse. And that's why we should, as I mentioned just now, the basic strategy and approach is to let whatever we have announced in the budget, which is already very generous, get implemented properly first, monitor the effects on the economy before we consider next steps, taking into consideration at that time the wider economic situation externally, the economic situation within Singapore, and for that matter, our own fiscal situation. I mean, don't take it for granted that the government has all the money to do everything, because we also have to ensure sound and sustainable public finances at the end of the day.
Order. End of ministerial statements on inflation and business costs. Minister Tan Si Leng, you want to wrap up?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, because Mr. Liang had two questions. So I'll be quick. So the CAP's focus is on essential food items commonly consumed by Singaporean households and non-food essentials such as household products. Earlier on, I shared that we will also take a data-driven approach to prioritize the investigations. And I said that there will be a sharing of data across different agencies itself. I think one thing I want to thank the member for suggesting is your observation in terms of some of those very, very small, tightly, very tight sectors itself. I think the best way to counter profiteering is really to promote competition, to have a wider range of service offerings and product offerings. So those are things that we are indeed looking into. Thank you.